Welcome to the Destiny Youth Online Bible Study. Destiny Youth is the youth ministry of Destiny Church located in Glasgow. We believe that the Bible is the final authority on all things. It is the written and living Word of God. Thanks for joining us as we dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Destiny Youth Online Bible Study. Today we are going to be going from Exodus 14 all the way through 19. We're going to be covering the escape from the Egyptian army, the sea being divided, and God revealing himself to his people on Mount Sinai. Joining me today is Iswat. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
We're glad that you're doing this with us. It's been so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get right into it. I'm going to start reading in chapter 14, verse 4. So this is the Lord speaking about Pharaoh. So he says, I will harden or make stubborn, defiant Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will be glorified and honored through Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians shall know without any doubt and acknowledge that I am the Lord. So we'll pause right there. Where we left off last time, obviously we went through the plagues of Egypt. God just destroys Egypt over the course of a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with Pharaoh is he would relent, but only to make there be a moment of the suffering stopping.
Yeah.
But he would continually change his mind and say, no, not letting them go. They have to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So now, after the death of all the firstborns, Pharaoh has let them go. They're on their way. But now there's a moment, I think we're actually gonna read it, where the Egyptians and Pharaoh almost come to this realization of, oh, wait a minute. Why did we let these people go?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
We are Egypt, and we
Mm-hmm.
just let them go.
Mm-hmm.
So then here's the Lord saying, I'm going to make it so that through Pharaoh, everyone in Egypt is going to know my glory.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So then in verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, what is this that we have done? Have we let Israel go from serving us? So Pharaoh harnessed horses to his war chariot for battle and took his army with him. And he took 600 chosen war chariots and all the other war chariots of Egypt with fighting charioteers all over them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites as they were leaving confidently and defiantly. Now we're going to skip down to verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw the Egyptians marching after them, and they were very frightened. So the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, it is because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What is this that you have done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians as slaves than to die in the wilderness. This is such an interesting part of the story here because we've seen God do these miraculous, amazing things. And this is one of the first moments where the Israelites return to this common phrase that they have of, it would have been better for us back in Egypt to have been slaves.
Yeah.
So when you were reading through this, what were your thoughts?
I think for me, it really strikes me how easy it is for you to forget the things that God has done for you. Because I don't know, in terms of days, I'm sure it was just a few days that they had left Egypt and walked into the desert that leads to the Red Sea. And it's like in the space of like that time, every single thing that God had done, all the great, like incredible signs and like the frogs and the darkness and like the death of like the firstborns, like they forgot all of that when they were confronted with like how do I put it, a difficult situation. And I think for me it's just a reminder, like it's easy for you to forget, it's easy for me to forget, and in order to not forget you have to have like signposts, like things that remind you of what God has done. If it's writing somewhere, like journaling, or having like a gratitude journal or whatever, just maybe even a process, like when I begin to feel under pressure, I'm going to begin to thank God for all the times he has come through for me. Yeah, so that's what stood out for me, like just how easily like they just forgot everything and they're wanting to go back into bondage. And it's like, I don't know if it's a natural thing that people do, like when you become uncomfortable you tend to like gravitate towards like maybe former comforts. I just found that very interesting because Egypt was not a good place for Israel. Like they were suffering, they were slaves, and it's like, why would you want to go back to bondage just because you're confronted with like, you know, Pharaoh and his army? Like surely the God that brought you out, he can take you like even further and like defeat the army of Egypt. But yeah, that was really, really striking.
Yeah, I think in like modern day terms, imagine you escaped from a country where you were a slave and you're stuck on the edge of this sea, and then here come like tanks and helicopters and men with guns, and you have nothing. So it's like I understand the fear, and it's almost as if the first step that they did was correct, because it says they cried out to the Lord. But then they said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you've taken us to die in the wilderness? So you can see, like, yeah, you are faced with the world's current superpower coming to either kill you or take you back.
Yeah.
Anyone would be afraid in that moment.
Absolutely.
But you also have to remember back to, they have seen incredible things, just like how we have seen incredible things. I mean, I've never seen, you know, hailstones the size of basketballs, but I've seen God do incredible things. And how often do we just forget what he has done for us in the past? And then it's like, oh, but this one's too much for God. The other thing that I love is what God says about how everyone will know. Because when you think about it, man's evil, like Pharaoh's evilness and wickedness, actually does not frustrate God's plan, because God actually allows men and women to exercise their free will, but God still, his plan and his action still happens. Whether someone is righteous or unrighteous, God's plans always bring glory to himself, as it should, because he's God. So even in this, allowing Pharaoh to continue to be prideful, to continue to harden his heart, is still going to bring the utmost glory to God, as we see when the sea is divided. Would you read 13 all the way? Let's do 13 and 14.
Okay, I'm reading in the NKJV version. And Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the I don't know what's going on with my words. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace."
So now do 18, 19, 21.
Okay. 18. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them.
And then 20 and 21.
21. So he came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and he gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left.
Okay, so this is what's so cool. We, in almost every movie that has to do with this moment, it's always like, Egyptians are here. Don't be afraid, guys.
Moses
Boom,
stretched
it
out,
splits. But this was actually,
It took a whole night.
yeah. So the army shows up. The people start freaking out. But then this is what's so cool. The pillar of cloud goes from in front of the Israelites and places itself between the Egyptians and the Israelites. So again, this, we'll just say magic. This magic pillar of cloud has now moved between you and the enemy to where they cannot get through it. And then at night, it turns into a pillar of fire. So putting myself in the shoes of Pharaoh, there's a magic pillar of fire between me and these people that I had already said, I'm going to let go. Now I've changed my mind. Here's this pillar of fire. This man is beyond repentance. Because if homeboy sees that God is about to have a barbecue and I'm on the menu, and you still decide to go after them, you've got some problems. But it's also just so cool because think about how well, I don't know, but if I'm there at night and I know the enemy is on the other side, but there's a gigantic wall of fire between me and them, how much better am I going to be sleeping that night knowing that there's this huge wall of fire
protecting me?
Yeah. Like that is so just how amazing the character of God is even though they're complaining to Moses, he still, like a good father, places himself between his children and the enemy as a very much a threat. Because if it was just a cloud the whole time, it's like, oh, we can't see through, we can't get through. But then he's like, no, man, fire. Like, you're not getting through.
Yeah.
So then, obviously, Moses goes to the sea. It splits. It's dry land that they're walking through. And it's a wall on their right hand and a wall on their left hand. So now, do 23 through 28.
Okay. 23. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots, and on their horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Should I go on?
No, you can stop there.
Yeah.
So we even have a moment of some of the Egyptians saying, "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord is fighting for them against the Egyptians."
Mm-hmm.
This is such a good example of what happens when people follow someone who is prideful. Because even though you may see the writing on the walls, so to speak, if you're following someone who is so full of pride, normally prideful people take everyone down with them. That's just a fact of life. And imagine if you, because this is the dichotomy of this is, imagine if you were one of those soldiers who was sworn to duty. Like you are here to serve this Pharaoh who you may firmly believe is half God. And your duty is to serve him, but you're also seeing, hey, you may be a half God, but this God who is a literal wall of fire is fighting for these Israelites. Let's let them go. Imagine if you had broke rank, rowed back out of the ocean and survived. But then what does that mean for you? Because you ran like a coward. You abandoned your duty to your king. But you did survive. So, like, for me, because duty is a very important thing for me. And just like, as a man, it's like you do what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, if I see God and I know I shouldn't be chasing these people, and then I ride the opposite way out of the sea and then see everyone else drown, it's like, I'm going to feel like a little bit of I don't know if dishonor is the right word, but like, oh man, I abandoned my people. But at the same time, I didn't defy this God who I've already seen do these amazing things. And now he's on fire. He's split the ocean in half. Maybe let's not mess with this guy.
Yeah.
It's just wild because, it doesn't say, it says not even one of them survived. So God just completely decimates this entire army.
Absolutely. And I think what's even interesting is how, like, their deliverance started, like, the night before. And I don't even know if the Israelites, like, realized everything that God had done in terms of him, like, sending the angels to mess with the wheels of the army of Egypt. And it's like, sometimes when you're confronted with, like, really difficult things in life, like, you don't see anything. But it's like, in the background, God is doing so much to protect you and to, like, bring deliverance for you. Because sometimes we just think, oh, he just, like, Moses just stretched out his hand and it parted, and in 2 minutes they were out of out of the sea. And it's like, it's not a swimming pool, it's a sea. It's like thousands of miles maybe, but God kept the water in place until every single Israelite had come out.
And just the thought of, like, walking between those two walls of water on your right hand and on your left hand. Whoa. First off. But nothing on earth scares me quite like the ocean. The ocean freaks me out. I love the ocean. I love the ocean. Most terrifying place on earth. Just because of how vast and how big it is. And so now you're going to walk through it. So that also, I'm sure, it takes trust.
That was a step of faith. Let's.
Are these walls going to come down while I'm halfway? God, what if you run out of magic power for the fire, and then you get distracted and the walls come out? Like, what's going to happen when I'm in here? It's like even that was a step of faith to go through that. But I love at the end, the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the seashore. So the thing that they were so afraid of in the beginning is now dead on the seashore, not a threat.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something so powerful about that of like, oh, that's just a guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid of that. And we literally had a pillar of fire and a God who split the ocean in half. And I was afraid of this dead man.
Mm-hmm.
It's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So they make it through. God destroys the army. And then I know that you had mentioned that you liked the songs.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah. The songs of Miriam. I like that they didn't just like, oh, we're saved now, let's keep walking to like the promise. Like they actually took time to really engage in like thanksgiving and gratitude. And, you know, it looked like Miriam singing a song about, you know, God being a mighty warrior. And I just found that really interesting. I think I was listening to someone and they were talking about how, you know, they had left Egypt in a fright, like very quickly, like, you know, just gathered like the most important things. And how, I don't even know if she had a tambourine as she was dancing. But essentially, like what they were trying to emphasize was that it's really important that you don't forget your praise, like regardless of what you face. It's really important to engage in thanksgiving and praising God. Because like, okay, what if like she did have a tambourine she packed? Like I'm sure Moses and Aaron would have been like, Miriam, this is the most ridiculous thing you can carry, like really a tambourine. But it's important, like we need to praise God, especially like when really significant things happens, like a sea opening. I don't think that's ever happened in history since that time.
Yeah, there's been water crossings, but like something of that magnitude and then wiping out a whole other army. Yeah,
like it's very significant, and I'm really like, I'm thankful like we can see Miriam setting an example like for us as Christians, like when God does in fact significant and insignificant things, we should engage in thanksgiving. But it's also like interesting because it's kind of showing us like, what's the word, the personality of the Lord as like a mighty warrior, which is really cool to see. And like it's good because like when you're facing like a difficult challenge, you know that okay, God can show up as a mighty warrior for myself. Yeah. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And then the fact that Moses took the time to write this down and record it also shows its importance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That one is chapter 15. So go and read that one on your own. It's really great. Yeah. And then once we get to the end of it, I'm just going to read 21 at the end of it. Miriam answered them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously and is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea."
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm also going to read 20, the one above it. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron and Moses, took a timbrel in her hand, or tambourine, some sort of instrument. And all of the women followed her with timbrels and dancing. So this was a, we tend to credit David a lot of the time with like high forms of worship and music and praise and everything, which, yes, David did so much to change the way that worship and praise happened, especially in the temple and surrounding the Ark of the Covenant and all these things. But we look back to here with Miriam and all of these women after this miraculous thing happens. It's the women who get out the instruments and start praising. And I also look at this similarly to how I look at the resurrection of Jesus. It was the women who were the first ones to
Yeah.
experience a risen
Mhm.
Jesus.
Yeah.
There's just something about, like, everyone needs to worship. Everyone should.
Mm.
But there's always things to pay attention to when it's just the women doing something,
Mm.
the importance behind it.
Mm.
Because obviously when you look at the story of the Exodus, it's very male driven.
Mhm.
Like Moses, Aaron, they're coming in doing these miracles. But then the fact, like I said again, for Moses to include this in the writings of what happened,
Mm.
there was something so significant to it.
Mhm.
I don't know what, because I'm not Moses, so I don't know.
Mm.
But I wonder what it was that Moses saw when this was happening, to
Mhm.
where he was like, I have to put this down,
Mm.
the significance of it. So then after this, still in chapter 15, we go to 22, and this is where the Lord provides water. They come to a place called Mara, but they couldn't drink the water because it was bitter or
Mm.
poisoned. I don't know exactly what would have happened if they had drank it. But then in verse 24, again, the people grew discontented and grumbled at Moses, saying, "What are we going to drink?" It's just,
Mm.
it's so funny to me. What are we going to drink? It's like, you do know that, like, God just split the sea in half?
Surely he can give you water.
Yeah. If he controls water, maybe he's going to provide, I don't know. Maybe he's going to give you something to drink. It's just so funny. But then we do this exact same thing in our own lives. We're just seeing it played out over the course of, one chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we can do the exact same thing over the course of a year.
Absolutely.
What are we going to drink?
Mm-hmm.
Then he cried to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a tree, a branch, which he threw into the waters, and the waters became sweet.
Mm-hmm.
There the Lord made a statute and ordinance for them, and there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen and pay attention to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and listen to his commandments, and keep foremost in your thoughts, and actively obey all his precepts and statutes, then I will not put on you any of the diseases which I have put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we get the first mention of Rapha, or Jehovah Rapha.
Yeah.
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, just off the top of my head, I think it was pronounced differently at the beginning of Jehovah Rafika or something along those lines. But this is the mention of the God who heals you. So he is making another promise to them here of, if you keep my commandments, if you obey me, then I'm the one who heals you. Then the children of Israel came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters. So he gets them through the sea. He provides water for them. He says, I'm the God who heals you. And now we get to chapter 16, which is the Lord providing manna and the Lord providing meat for them out in the wilderness. So I'll go ahead and read 16 verses 2 through 7, 2 through 8, and then if you would be ready to do 12 through 21.
Okay.
So 16 verse 2, the whole congregation of the Israelites grew discontented and murmured and rebelled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the Israelites said to them, would that we have died by the hand of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and ate bread until we were full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this entire assembly with hunger. Again, this is such a funny thing to me, of this complaint of, oh, we're all gonna die. Every single one. We don't have any water, we're gonna die. We don't have any food, we're gonna die. It's like, what? Not even just, hey, Moses, some of us are getting a little concerned. Our tummies are a little rumbly. We're getting a little hungry here. It's like, we're gonna die. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will cause bread to rain from the heaven for you. The people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, so that I may test them to determine whether or not they will walk obediently in my instruction, in my law. And it shall be that on the 6th day they shall prepare to bring in twice as much as they gather daily, so that they will not need to gather on the 7th day. So now the Lord is establishing the Sabbath. So Moses and Aaron said to all Israel, at evening you shall know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your murmurings against the Lord. What are we that you murmur and rebel against us? Moses said, this will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning enough bread to be fully satisfied, because the Lord has heard your murmurings against him. For what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. So now if you'll pick it up from verse 12
to 21.
Yeah.
I have heard the complaints of the children of Israel, speaking to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So it was that quails came up at evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance as fine as frost on the ground. So when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, this is bread. This is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. Let every man gather it according to each one's need. 1 omer for each person, according to the number of persons. Let every man take for those who are in his tent. Then the children of Israel did so, and gathered, some more, some less. So when they measured it by omers, he who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man had gathered according to each one's needs, or each one's need. And Moses said, let no one leave any of it till morning. Notwithstanding, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. So they gathered it every morning, every man according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted.
Yeah. So the omer measurement was a little over 2 quarts, just those who are curious. So an omer for each person, 2 quarts per each person. Gather no more, no less. And then, of course, you had some hoarders coming along trying to get a little extra. And then all of a sudden, worms, it's rotten, it's foul. And then once they left it out, it melted in the sun. This has been one of the things that I've always been like, what was it?
The
manna.
The manna.
Yeah, because even whenever they're saying to each other, when they see it, they go, what is it? But, you know, there's been people who have tried to have a scientific explanation behind it. I don't think there is one. I think it was just miraculous, because also you have to think, there's people who are like, oh, there could have been, you know, plant seed pods on the ground. There could have been this. But listen, these are people who have lived close to this area for a long time. Moses has lived close to this area
in the wilderness
for a long time. Yet they're saying, what is it? Therefore, this is a supernatural occurrence. This can't be some plant that they've just randomly discovered. Thoughts on that from you?
Yeah, I think I think in one translation it says like a wafer-like substance.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone really knows what it was, except that this was bread
Yeah.
from heaven, bread that the Lord had provided.
It's interesting, the evaporation.
Yeah,
Like it's dew, and then the water evaporates, and then it leaves behind
like a
this
bread-like
bread
thing,
substance.
and then in the afternoon it melts away.
Yeah. Almost like communion wafers.
That's what's
Yeah.
coming to my mind. Like,
Like this is just a silly thought, but imagine if God is, if God was like, listen, I'm going to give you something you have in the future. They're these little communion wafers.
yeah.
I'm just going to throw those on the ground for you guys to collect. And now that was communion wafers. But I don't know. It's so interesting
Yeah.
because a communion wafer wouldn't melt in the sun.
No, it wouldn't. Mm-mm.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the Sabbath established. And then in chapter 17, we have water coming from the rock. Read that one on your own as well. Because again, in verse 3, but the people were thirsty for water. The people murmured against Moses and said, why did you bring us up from Egypt to, again, here they go, to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? But then, of course, water comes from the rock. One thing I wanted to point out here before we go into chapter 18, just because I love the history of this and how it all works together. In verse 8, it is entitled, Amalek fought. So in verse 8 it says, then Amalek and his people came and fought with Israel. So Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek and his people. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So one key thing, Amalek is, I think he's the grandson of Esau. So we have the descendants of Esau, because remember back when Jacob betrayed Esau, took the birthright, he met Esau later on in his life. He was deathly afraid of him. Esau was a fighting man, a hunter. His people were known to like raid and pillage. So he was definitely afraid to meet him. But now, Jacob, he has his son Joseph. Joseph goes to Egypt. He brings all of them over to Egypt. They're there for about 400 years. And then we're at this point now. So you would have to think the Amalek and his people, the Amalekites, remain enemies of Israel for a very long period. Even up until the point of David and Saul. They're still fighting the Amalekites. And then even after that, whenever you study where Haman or Haman came from with Esther, he was a descendant of Amalek. So we have them in this moment. The Amalekites, I'm sure, heard about the Hebrews going to Egypt, getting this land, being very well off during this famine that was happening.
Yeah.
So whatever kind of love that Esau had for Jacob, I'm sure during that period died out, because now they're seeing, oh, the Israelites are flourishing in Egypt. And then they become slaves. So at that point, I'm sure that it turned to, haha, look at them. Look at what's happened to them. But now they've heard again, they've escaped from Egypt. They left Egypt with all the spoils. So I'm pretty sure the Amalekites saw being a raiding group.
So an opportunity.
Oh, these people, they have all of these things from Egypt. We can go and get their stuff. And guess what? We don't like them. Perfect. Let's go. So then Joshua does what Moses said. They go on and they fight the Amalekites. Moses held up his hand and the staff, and while he was holding it up, I'm just going to read from verse 11 now.
Mm-hmm.
Israel prevailed, and when he lowered his hand due to fatigue, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and he grew tired. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Then Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and one on the other side, so it was that his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed and defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in the book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly wipe out the memory of Amalek and his people from under heaven." So now we have a reference to 1 Samuel 15, 2 through 8. And I know we're supposed to be in Exodus, but 1 Samuel 15, 2 through 8. Will you look that up?
Yeah. 1 Samuel 16?
15 verses 2 through 8.
Okay. 1 Samuel 15, 2 to 8. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. Then Saul said to the Kenites.
Sure.
Go depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites, and Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. Should I stop there?
Yeah. So, here back in Exodus. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in the book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly wipe out the memory of Amalek and his people from under heaven." God says, I'm going to wipe these people out because of what they've done today, because of this ambush that they've placed upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go to Saul, who, if you know the story, God instructs him to go and wipe these people out. Saul does not listen. He spares their king. He spares several other people. And then, I believe 2 chapters from that moment in Samuel, they're at war with the Amalekites again. And then you fast forward to Esther.
Was Goliath an Amalekite? Oh no, he was a Philistine.
He was with the Philistines. But when you fast forward to Esther, you have Haman, the descendants of the Amalekites, again trying to wipe out,
destroy
the Hebrews.
Yeah.
So this has been a back and forth thing for the longest time. And God has continually tried to help his people by saying, listen, if you don't want trouble in the future, wipe them out.
Yeah.
This is what I am telling you to do. But when they don't obey fully, it always leads to some other trouble down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's just so interesting, this right here, where he tells Moses to write this down. And then, of course, Saul does not obey. But who tells Saul to go and do this? Samuel. Samuel knew what this said, but Saul didn't listen. Saul didn't know what it said. So now in 15, and Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." Again, another name of the Lord, saying, "The Lord has sworn an oath. The Lord will have war against the people of Amalek from generation to generation." I love the Bible. This, if I could leave you with anything from this Bible study, this book is unlike any other book in the world. These books, because the Bible is a collection of books, were written by different people at different times in different areas, yet all of these connections are being made.
Mm.
There is no other book
Mm.
on the planet that does this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's so interesting about this book.
Mm.
Is it is alive. It is the living word of God.
Mm.
And the amount of connections that are in here, where when you start reading it, you will see a connection to every single thing, even though it is a different author written in a different language.
Mm.
So beautiful. Like you need to love the Bible. So now we're in chapter 18, which is the visitation of
Jethro.
Moses' father-in-law Jethro. So will you begin reading from verse 2 all the way to 10?
Okay. Exodus 8:2. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back with her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliza, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. Now he said to Moses,
Moses.
I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship they had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians.
Great. So now they're talking for a bit. This is where Jethro shares some wisdom with Moses after seeing the way that Moses is kind of going throughout his day. Will you read 13 through 15?
Okay. 13. And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people. And the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws.
Yeah. So Moses is not a good delegator at this point.
Mm-mm.
Moses tends to take on a lot of work. We even see this with his wife and sons were sent back because he was like, I ain't got time for this. Like, y'all go back. And now here he is every single day, other than the Sabbath, morning until evening, people coming in and saying like, hey, we have this dispute. This is my shovel. And he borrowed it and he never gave it back. I'm sure it was some dumb stuff like that and then some other stuff. But all day long, Moses is doing this. And then we actually spoke about this earlier. Moses is having to deal with these everyday issues, which could easily be placed upon somebody else. Moses' number one job should be writing these books of the Bible, and number two, speaking with the Lord. But I just want to point this out because this is so important with like ministry and pastors and anyone who's listening who wants to go into ministry, is in ministry, whatever it is. If you were trying to draw people unto yourself to where you can't catch a break, everyone is always having to come to you for spiritual advice, and you don't know how to delegate, you're going to be in this exact same predicament that Moses is in.
Yeah.
It is because, believe me, in the discipleship that I do with like youth and young people now, I have a limit of how many people I take on. Because then it's like, oh, I need to talk. It's okay, find somebody else. I love you, but you got to find somebody else. Because I can't. Like Jesus had 12 disciples. I am not Jesus. I am the furthest thing from Jesus. So if Jesus was like, you know what, 12 close disciples, that's good. That's what I'll work with. I'll do maybe 8. It's like, I'm not even going to attempt 12 because there's other things that I need to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's other things that Moses needed to be doing. And we even see it with Jethro saying, what is this that you're doing for the people? Why are you sitting alone as a judge with all these people standing around you, dawn till dusk?
Yeah.
So then Jethro, we're going to skip down a little bit. He counsels Moses. And he says in verse 19, now listen to me. I will advise you, and may God be with you to confirm my advice. I love that. Jethro is awesome. I will advise you, and may God be with you to confirm my advice. You shall represent the people before God. Imagine if Jethro had not shown up. Like we skip over the importance of Jethro so much. If he hadn't have said this to Moses, I think Moses just one day would have snapped.
Or he could have even died from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shall represent the people before God. You shall bring their disputes and causes to him. You shall teach them the decrees and laws. You shall show them the way that they are to live and the work they are to do. Furthermore, you shall select from all the people competent men who reverently fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain. You shall place these over the people as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. They shall judge the people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, so not whose shovel is it, every major dispute to you, but let them judge every minor dispute themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you will do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure the responsibility, and all these people will also go back to their tents in peace. Now, the most important piece. So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything that he had said. Young people, listen to the advice of older people. Now, Jethro's approach was perfect. Listen to me, I'll advise you, and may God be with you to confirm my advice. His approach is just awesome. But when someone is trying to give you advice, listen.
Yeah. Even if it's advice you don't like.
Yes, because Jethro had so much wisdom to share with Moses. And lest we forget, he is the high priest of Midian. So he has already experienced this. Yeah, he's been a leader. Moses has seen him be a leader. So he puts this all in place. And then the thing that he says, you shall teach them the decrees and laws of God, which is what we will get to in our last chapter, which is 19. This is Moses on Sinai, and then the Lord actually appearing to the Israelites. So, Iswat, will you do chapter 19, verse 3 through 6?
Okay. Exodus 19, 3 to 6. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, I will indeed, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel.
Okay, now 9 through 12.
Okay. 9 to 12. And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I come to you in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. So Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you do not go up the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death.
Okay, so God is saying to Moses, I'm going to appear on the mountain. You're going to come and speak to me. You're going to set barriers at the bottom of the mountain, because if these people get too close, it's very likely my presence could kill them.
Yeah.
And this is also a moment of like, I'm going to teach my people how to honor me. And I'm going to speak to you, but they're going to hear it so that they know when I'm speaking to you, it is my words. So now in verse 16, so it happened on the third day when it was morning that there were thunder and flashes of lightning, and a thick cloud was on the mountain, and a very loud blast was sounded on a ram's horn, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood and presented themselves at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. And it happened as the blast of the ram's horn grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with a voice of thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and he went up. So Moses goes up. He speaks with the Lord, and the people hear the voice of God as like thundering from the mountain. This is a thing that we're going to look at later. But when they heard God's voice, a lot of theologians believe that they marked this occasion of hearing the voice of God by putting earrings in their ears, which will lead to something very interesting later on as we continue through this study. But they all did this as like, we heard the voice of God. We're marking ourselves.
They can like remember we've heard God.
Yes. Yeah. So he speaks with the Lord on the mountain. They hear his voice. This is not only to back up like the fact that Moses is hearing from God, but this is also like how special you are. That they are, that they would be allowed to be near him. Because before it was theophanies, like these physical manifestations of God. So fire, the pillar of cloud, but now God is there and he's going to speak. How incredibly special. Whenever we come back into the study, we'll go over chapters 20 through 33, go through some of the commandments and the law that is given to Moses, and of course go through the golden calf story. But yeah, this is such a pivotal moment of they just escaped Egypt, where they had been dabbling in the pagan practices of Egypt. They saw God do these miraculous things. They saw the hail, the insects, the ocean splitting, all these different things. But now for the first time, they heard his voice as thunder. Just, whoa. And now, of course, God is moving Moses into the position of, you're going to hear on behalf of these people my laws that I'm going to put in place for them to obey. And that is where we will pick it up next time. Thank you so much, Iswat, for being with us today.
Of course. Thanks for always having me.
Yeah. Couple of review questions for you guys. Number one, how would you have felt seeing the enemy, the Egyptian army, first off? How would you feel knowing that you've escaped, but now they're here? And then how would you feel seeing that pillar of cloud and that pillar of fire move from in front of you to now between you and the enemy? And then the second part of the question is, how much faith do you think it took to walk between the walls of water, crossing onto the other side? Just a fun discussion amongst yourselves, seeing all of those things. What would you have been feeling? Put yourself in their shoes and just discuss it with your family, with your friends, and we will see you guys next time.